Hello and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm your host, Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News, and it's our weekly roundup of some of the stories making headlines this week here in northern Michigan with the journalists that are covering those stories. So we've got a full table this week, so we want to welcome everybody to the table. To my right, we've got Jakob Wheeler from the Glen Arbor Sun. Welcome back, Jakob.
Thanks, Bill.
Pat Sullivan from Northern Express. Good to see you again, Pat.
Hi, Bill.
And Alan Campbell from the Leelanau Enterprize. Good to see you as well, Alan.
Good to see anybody. So
Thanks for coming in. Gosh, the story, lots of stories in Leelanau County especially. It's a good week to have you guys in. But the one national story that kind of everyone's paying attention to, a couple of them actually, but the one for this week, government shutdown. And I know you guys have been talking with Sleeping Bear Dunes about the effects of that government shutdown on operations up there. Jakob, why don't we start with you and just tell us what you've learned and what's changed at Sleeping Bear this week.
Well, if you bike down the Sleeping Bear Heritage Trail through the D.H. Day campground, all you'll hear is the sound of wind through leaves. There are no campers. It's eerily silent, which the last couple of days have been beautiful Indian summer days, the fall colors coming alive, and yet there's no one there. The parks are done. I mean, on October 1st, the day the government shut down, the campers were given minutes, I believe, to pack up and leave. So it's eerily quiet. The Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore staff itself has sent home all but 4 employees. They're on furlough, awaiting news out of Washington.
So who is left?
I think it's a couple. It's not the suits in the Visitor Center in Empire as I thought it may be. I don't believe that it's Dusty Schultz and Tom Ulrich. In fact, we know it's not. It's a couple of security personnel who can kind of keep the core functions running, probably at a database somewhere. Mm-hmm. But the Pier Stocking Scenic Drive is closed. You can still bike there if you want, but as I did yesterday, but there are leaves and sticks all over the place. If you get hurt, an ambulance can't get to you. The dune climb, of course, they can't close the dunes and they can't close the lake, but the parking lot is closed. And so it's going to be toughest on school groups who can't show up. It's going to be toughest on the elderly and on the disabled who they can't get out and walk or bike for miles and miles and miles, right? It's a real shame.
So they're not saying that you have to stay away from it all entirely. If you can hike there or bike there, you're allowed to be inside the park right now.
Essentially, I mean, I think there was a quote from the regional headquarters saying, look, if you trespass, if you go beyond the gates where you're not supposed to be, you're probably not going to get arrested or ticketed because the people who would arrest you or ticket you are on furlough right now.
But so they could. They just say they're probably not going
Hypothetically.
to. Huh.
But the park is closed. It's closed.
Well, what just struck me as odd is we were talking with the Sequester months ago how the scenic drive was going to shut down after Labor Day anyway. So this is almost turned out to be the same thing. They just had that extension. Alan?
I don't get the closing the scenic drive, and maybe it makes sense to close the parking lot for the dunes, but I mean these are basically I don't want to say they run themselves, but they're unguided tours that you can take. They have kept their park rangers, what they say they're probably Chris Johnson, the folks who enforce the laws, they're still there because that's a health, safety, and welfare issue. But as you say, I mean, we got a hold of Tom at home, and everyone in Leelanau County, everyone knows where everybody is, so it isn't like you don't know where these folks are. But they are pretty tight-lipped, and I think that the government is trying to run this shutdown from a top-down basis, and the folks in Sleeping Bear don't have a lot of say, as in the administrators don't have a lot of say in how this is playing out, which is a shame. I think if you asked Tom or Dusty, they're access people. They fought for access during the last back in probably 10 years ago now when they're developing a master plan for the park. But this is run from the top down. I don't know if I don't know the intentions, if it's intended to create the most change as far as usage and to limit usage, but the bottom line is that's the effect.
Yeah. The other thing I thought was interesting, I went online to the Sleeping Bear Dunes website yesterday, and the website was shut down because of the government shutdown.
Yeah.
And I thought, even just to have a website to look at,
right.
It doesn't take someone sitting at a computer to keep the website visible.
Ditto with a voicemail. If you call 326-5134, the national park number, it rings about 6, 7, 8 times, and then you get a new recording, which is essentially saying we've all gone home until further notice.
Right, and the other thing about that is it took somebody Monday morning to make that recording. It took somebody working somewhere to shut down the websites. Again, there's a little mystery of where the line is drawn of what work is being done or not done.
But it is a shame, right? I mean, with the sequester early this year, all parks had to cut their budgets by 5%, Sleeping Bear included, and Sleeping Bear came up with this plan. Well, in fact, Alan, as you say, the plan was forced on it from Washington, where the local park wanted to just cut back hours for employees, but it was told, no, you're going to have to close these locations, such as the New Klein parking lot, such as Pure Stock and Scenic Drive, and so it closed them until Memorial Day, and then it was going to close them after Labor Day, but they found some contingency money, but which is now, of course, a moot point because of the federal shutdown.
Something else that jumped out at me yesterday too, Yosemite National Park also closing down, kicking campers out of the campsites, but they gave their campers 24 hours. They said you don't have to leave till Tuesday.
Well,
what a raw deal.
Well,
County has to leave Monday.
Well, they did in Sleeping Bear. They gave them notice and they moved them on. But the question is where they went. We called the homestead, seeing if they'd heard from any folks who moved in. No, they hadn't. We called another inn owner and no, they hadn't. And my guess is they just left. I mean, campers are campers. They have a way that they like to enjoy the park, and if that way's not there, they're leaving. Which goes to the big point you were talking about. It's so quiet, and so cash registers are quiet, and so if this goes on much longer, the restaurants, the businesses that really beefed up for this shoulder season. They're going to have to make a decision because they're staffed for a full park, which is what we've had for several years, right. And that's not what's going to happen. People, when they hear the park's closed, they don't think, okay, I can still walk the trails. I mean, they just hear the park's closed.
The park's closed.
Right.
Campers were asked to leave on Monday morning, though, weren't they?
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just wait and see. Obviously, as of Thursday morning, as we're sitting here, no progress from Washington on all that. Well, another story in Leelanau County that's big this week, the potential sale of Sugarloaf Resort. All of us, I think, have been paying attention to this story for years. We got another quasi-update in the form of a very big press release over the weekend. Pat, give me your take on Leco Smith and the potential for reopening Sugarloaf.
I saw the press release yesterday, and it was a bizarre press release. He's the world's most extreme CEO, according to the press release. I have no idea what that means. It's interesting because it's another chapter in what's been going on for years. It's just a weird, unfortunate story because you got all these people who, really just want Sugarloaf to be open again, and it's been sitting there since 2002, closed, and it's one character after another who comes in with start out with these big grand plans. Like, according to his press release, Leco Smith says he's going to open it by November of 2014.
Right.
So just over a year. It's going to be an extreme snowboard complex, and if you look at his track record, it's hard to understand how that's going to happen because he ran a couple of. Based on what I saw on the web, they look like kind of second-rate snowboarding hotels out west, and
they've all shut down.
They were shut down because he failed to pay taxes and he went to prison. So, how much hope can we place in this guy?
And he built co-investors for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it's.
So worst case scenario, he'll bring some business into town and then not pay taxes.
This should be entertaining to watch in the media. I mean, it's at the very least.
Well, Alan, this has been going on since 2002, but we heard Leco Smith's name in 2008, 2009. He came to Traverse City and held a $100 a plate fundraiser. Mm-hmm. Nobody really knows what happened to that money. Maybe it paid legal fees. I don't know. But give me your take on that and What was your first reaction when you saw the name Leelanau Smith pop up again after 4 years?
Well, I guess surprise. I mean, I think that's what he's actually reached out to talk to you. I believe through some type of a bizarre situation. It sounds like he wants to control the spin on this whole thing.
We might have an interview with him tomorrow. Pre-approved questions that his secretary asked me to submit. So I actually emailed Eric Carlson at the Enterprise and a few other reporters to ask, hey, did you get a request from Leelanau for pre-approved questions? He thinks he can control everything. He doesn't quite get the media.
See how long that lasts. Your first reaction, Jakob, when you saw the name Leelanau Smith again after 4 years?
Well, I mean, Saturday, the Friends of Sugarloaf Facebook page began to explode with this press release from PR Newswire. I thought it was a publicity stunt. I thought, does Leelanau want to see sales of snowboards in the Midwest increase before the season begins? I mean, what's going on? Because when he left town in 2010 after an ill-fated attempt to acquire Sugarloaf, I mean, not only did you mentioned the $100 plate fundraiser at Red Ginger in Traverse City, where he left without even paying Red Ginger, he literally left behind a trail of unpaid hotel bills in town here, and he literally couldn't pay for his lunch at various places around Leelanau County. I mean, he was absolutely broke. He had nothing, and his attempt to find co-investors in Leelanau or elsewhere came up short. And since then, he's been arrested for not paying back taxes. There's a trail of people in Tahoe and all over California who want money from him. So I couldn't believe it. But on a side note, I think it's interesting that he basically wrote this press release calling himself the world's extreme sports entrepreneur. PR Newswire, which is out of New York, I believe, they run the press release verbatim, and they sell content to news organizations such as a TV station in Kansas City, which was the top Googling hit. Unedited and unverified, which is a commentary in the state of journalism today, unfortunately.
Well, I was going to say, too, it's almost, I mean, anybody can write their own press release and distribute it. So that in of itself is, if it came from Leelanau Smith directly, it maybe wouldn't have been any different for us. But the fact that it did come from PR Newswire, which we kind of know is just this clearinghouse of, they just shuffle papers and nobody really knows where it comes from.
Extremely unusual press. I think we called it editorially this week a press release that has all the makings of coming from an egomaniac. He just he builds himself. Of course, I was in jail, but I've recovered now, and I was deeply altered in jail. I think that's a requirement of those types. And the strangest part of the press release is he has this press release about his glitzy future and his plans. Never mentions who he buys it from. No seller mentioned in the press release. I think that says probably more about the state of Sugarloaf than anything else that could happen. A press release about the sale and no mention of who's selling it until that's really becomes clear, as opposed to rumors, as in something that is verifiable in the Register of Deeds office. There is no answer for Sugarloaf,
right.
And that remains.
You brought up a good point too, just the state of journalism, how it's on the Kansas City website. I saw it on a TV station website verbatim out of, I think, Lake Tahoe or somewhere in Nevada. So I guess my question is, how did you guys handle it or view it when it first came across your desk? And you guys may be different in terms of weekly publications, but for me it was just this dilemma of, okay, do we report a rumor? How much time do we investigate it before we say something? Because it's obviously out there now, and it's one of those things you just can't ignore.
Sure. That's a good question. I mean, if you suspect that something is bogus, do you want to really give it credence? First thing I did, I think Sunday, was I put up a notice that a press release had been put online by Leelanau, essentially, and then we just gave a rundown of our previous stories, mostly from 2010, of his past failings in these parts. Thursday today? By Tuesday night, we posted a story that looked into this case a little bit. We were able to talk to realtor John Pepler, who has Sugarloaf listed for $5.7 million.
Yep.
He confirmed that that an offer is on the table, has been made. He confirmed that it is Lico Smith, but the sale is not done. He's still accepting counteroffers, which runs in the face of that Lico Smith press release saying that Sugarloaf is his.
This has been purchased.
But an offer has been made.
And I was told yesterday that there was a signed purchase agreement now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're getting closer, but it's still, like
We're
you said,
getting-
until it's a done deal, it's not a
straight,
done
and,
deal.
you know, and John, he's as straightforward as you can.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not just you know a very quality person, and he's caught in this because he's been hired to represent, and who wouldn't represent a $5.7 million possible sale?
Mm-hmm.
But you know, John's not going to tell you who else signed that document.
Right.
So he's also not saying who is the seller. So with all those clouds, we've probably given it more time than what it deserves, but it is interesting.
That's the biggest question, right? Is who are Lico Smith's co-investors, if there are? Because he doesn't have that kind of money. At least he did not have that kind of money. He didn't have any money. Literally, he had no money 3 years ago. So who's backing him? And that's the biggest question in my mind. I mean, prior to this, he was attempting to launch LV Air, Las Vegas Airlines, which was to be this glitzy exclusive airline that would fly you into Las Vegas from New York and give you champagne and so on and so forth, girls in cocktail dresses and all this on the plane. I don't think that went anywhere either. But the question is, who are his potential co-investors? One of the biggest questions in my mind 3 years ago was to what degree the Polzelli family, Remo and Hannah Carcho Polzelli, who had the resort essentially when it last saw skiers in 2000, sold it to Kate Wickstrom, but kind of had her under their thumb more or less for years. Lico Smith in 2010 denied that the Polzellis had any role in this, but news emerged pretty quickly that he'd had a lot of business dealings with Remo and Hannah Carcho. They're based downstate, but active as well in California and Florida. The call I got on Tuesday from Lico Smith, from his assistant, came from a hotel in California, and a little backtracking of that number revealed that he's basically, his office at that hotel is based out of the New California Hotel, which is owned by Remo and Hannah Carcho Polzelli. So he's no longer pretending not to be associated with the Polzellis.
Interesting. So Pat, where do you go from here with this story? What other than sitting back and watching, how much more can we do?
That you guys will do different stuff with the story than I will. I mean, I just sit back and wait until I think I can write kind of a news feature, like with some perspective. I'm not going to try to cover this like blow by blow.
Yeah. One of the let's shift gears and talk about something you are covering this upcoming week. Hard to believe we've got election season to start thinking about too. But tell us what's going on local politics that you're watching this week, Pat.
We decided that we wanted to try to do a feature. There's a lot of people. There are 7 people running for city council in Traverse City, 2 people running for mayor. And so I set out to, I want to do a questionnaire and submit these guys some questions. And because from what I'd seen, I really couldn't tell the difference between the candidates very much. And so I tried to design questions that would try to elicit responses that would distinguish. Yeah. So a reader could look at it and say, okay, I see this guy's coming from here. And so we talked about Division Street, we talked about cycling, we talked about parks, we talked about, only had 4 questions. How many festivals we should have at the Bay. I tried to ask very specific questions, and then I got the answers back from 6 of the 7 commission candidates and both of the mayor candidates, and I found that no matter how much, the answers still. We'll see.
They're
I guess
vague.
when you come out, we'll see whether I accomplished what I was setting out to do. The only Rick Buckholter, who's challenging Michael Estes for mayor, was the one who really stood out, and was really just sort of unfiltered answering the questions. And I think he's kind of known for that. But he's also, I think, serious observers of the election don't believe he really has much of a chance to win. So maybe that says something.
Interesting. Well, let's close out real quickly with another story. Leelanau County, Alan, you guys have been following, and we have too on the radio about the old courthouse property in Leland. This is kind of like Sugarloaf, one of the things that just never materialized. County sold off that property, moved the county seat, and now it looks like it will go back to the hands of the county, right?
Well, there's a lot of things that have to go right. I think they will go right because now there's a financial incentive for them to go right. There's a lot of liens on that property. There was a townhouse built that the county will receive, and they'll also receive basically a small municipal water system. But really, the roots to this thing go back to when the county moved. It almost selected or decided it wanted these two investors, local guys, and been in the community a lot, and really agreed to do a lot of what the community wanted with their development. But they were terribly underfinanced. And so the problems began when the county, I don't want to say because they set up a brownfield, but the reasons they set up a land, they set up what is the name of that group? Anyways, that can hold land that lives within the county government, so that they could transfer the land bank, so they could transfer title to the land bank, and then the land bank could provide a land contract. So they kind of really bent over backwards for these folks to the point that they financed the whole deal. And it wasn't a really good time to finance a deal in 2008 because like about a year later, everything's worth a third less.
Yep.
And finally, this thing is unraveling. I don't want to say unraveling in a bad way. It's unraveling in a good way. And maybe we can start all over. A huge.
So they're looking at a just shy of $600,000 purchase price to take it back and then flip it, ideally, right?
Ideally. The other problem is that there's $600,000 in loans that were given to the Brownfield Authority to clean up the site. And there's discussions about some contamination still being on the site. And if there's maybe any lesson, it's if you sell a property, maybe you ought to just sell the property. And I think a lot of some commissioners are I think all commissioners are coming to that part of the table.
Well, another one we'll keep watching. Appreciate all you guys coming in today. Alan Campbell from the Leelanau Enterprise, Pat Sullivan from Northern Express, and Jakob Wheeler from the Glen Arbor Sun. Guys, thanks everybody for coming in. And thanks for watching The Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich, and we will see you again next week right here.